history. And over the years, I found a lot of information, misinformation, myths, and things back and forth. Not that people inherently lied. They just had bad information and they got repeated and expanded and elaborated. So what I did was, this year I started going through and said, I'll put together a presentation in June because it'll be the 100th anniversary. And unfortunately, I didn't realize that when I made these things, they don't appear too well with all the lighting in here. So a lot of it is going to have to be verbally described to you. First of all, over 50 years ago, this book was printed, The Guns of August, by Barbara Tuchman. And it was considered the classic book. It's a great book on what happened in that first time. And what happened this year, because it's been so many years and Barbara's dead, people went out and created new books and said, well, that's a nice book, but go buy the new book. So I went out and bought the new books, and I strongly recommend them both. One is called Catastrophe, 1914, Europe Goes to War. And the other one is called The War That Ended the Peace, The Road to 1914. Again, they're heavy reading. They're not something you're going to just knock off, just for the fun of it. When I was in college, this was required reading, The Guns of August, and I read it while I was still in high school. Great material, okay? And the assassination has so many things going with it, but you need to know the backstory, and that's the problem. Most people don't know the backstory. So I'm going to do the backstory first, Austria. Then I'm going to do the backstory, Serbia. And then we're going to get to the assassination itself and the consequences of what happened between June 28, 1914, and basically January 1915 when they execute 3 of the assassins. The first thing is the Austro-Hungarian Empire. There were 2 major groups that ran things, the Germans and the Magyars. That's why it was called the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. But within that empire were my grandparents, okay? There were Poles, there were Ukrainians, there were Slovaks, Croatians, a whole bunch of people, Serbians, and a lot of them felt not part of that empire. Okay, when I checked the records on when my grandmother came to America, they actually came from Austria, because there was no Poland in 1896, okay? The country had been divided up, and part of it was in the Austria-Hungarian Empire. Franz Joseph, who was the emperor, was a tough old bird. He slept in an army cot, even though he was the king. He could have had, super cushioned bed and everything else. He was a tough guy, and he raised his son very strict and tough, because his son was going to eventually become the king. Well, his son, unfortunately, had the habit of falling in love with married women, which is not a good thing if you're a Roman Catholic country and you're the king and you're supposed to be ruling by divine right, okay? And he fell in love very hard for this one particular woman, and he wanted to marry her, and the father says, you can't do that. Someday you're going to be the emperor. Anyway, his son, who was, rebellious against his father anyway, him and his girlfriend, whatever, went off and did a Romeo and Juliet, okay? They poisoned themselves. We'll be together in the next world, we can't be in this one, okay? So now here's Franz Joseph. He doesn't have a son who's going to take over. He's got to look around at his relatives, and he's got a couple of nephews. And one of them is Francis Ferdinand. Okay? So he decides Francis Ferdinand will inherit the throne. Now, Franz Joseph, life expectancy in those days was like 60 to 70 years of age. So he's planning on, when the time comes, my nephew will take over. Got to get my nephew ready for taking over. First thing I got to do is get him a wife, so they can produce an heir and a spare. That was, one of the obligations of being a royal family. You got to produce an heir and a spare. Okay? 2 boys at least. Girls are extras. They're trading items, like baseball cards, I'll trade you my daughter for your son, okay. But you got to have 2 sons, all right? That's critical. Anyway, they fix him up with a woman of high noble birth. And he meets this woman, but while he's there, he also meets what are called her ladies in waiting, which is similar to what we do at weddings, the bridesmaids. They're your good friends that are with you. And he falls in love with Sophie. Now, Sophie is a Bohemian princess, but she is not high nobility, okay? But he falls in love with Sophie, one of the ladies in waiting for the woman he's supposed to be fixed up with. So he goes to his uncle and he says, I want to marry Sophie. Of course, the old man's like, can't you keep her on the side? But you got to marry her. No, I want to marry Sophie. This really upsets Franz Joseph. He finally says, okay, here is the deal. If you want to marry her, it's going to be what's called a morganastic relationship, which I had to go find out. It's a weird situation. It says the children do not inherit the throne. The children you have with this woman are not in the line of succession. They're not blue blood enough, okay? So he goes, I'll agree to that, which is what the uncle thought he would, okay. No, you say, I'm cool with that. I'll do that. And they say, you realize she's never going to be treated with respect. And to show the insult that they do to Sophie, when Archduke Ferdinand would arrive at any royal function, you know, they do the announcement, they pound the stick, you know, Archduke, he would walk into the room. His sisters would walk into the room. His cousins would walk into the room. And later on, his wife would come. All right? And any time they were in Austria, she gets these slights all the time. Okay? Now, the time where she is treated right is when they go out of Austria. When they would visit Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm made it a point to treat her as an equal. So Ferdinand sort of knows Kaiser Wilhelm treats my wife with the respect due the wife of a future emperor. But in Austria, no. Constant slights to her status. Alright? So, in June of 1914, the Archduke is invited to go to Sarajevo to visit Bosnia to try to smooth out things. It's a public relations tour. Okay? And for whatever stupid reason, they picked June 28th. June 28th to the Serbian Orthodox religion and history is a day called Viladan. It's an important date because in 1589 the Turks kicked their ass. And for whatever reason, they make it a major holiday where they honor the martyrs of 700 years ago. For anybody to visit them on Viladan, June 28th, would be almost like the Prime Minister of Japan coming to Hawaii on December 7th, okay? Or the President of Mexico coming on Alamo Day. You know, find another day. Just, you know, let's not make any connections here, okay? So, here is this holiday coming up. And he's going to go and visit. But there's another reason his wife insists on going with him. June 28th is their wedding anniversary, all right? So she wants to be with him. It's their wedding anniversary. They're outside of the center of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, so she can be in the car with him. She can walk with him. She doesn't have to be 30 steps behind after the cousins, nephews, aunts, and uncles. All right? She is part of the deal. So they are going to visit. Now, within Austria, there were people who did not like Ferdinand because he wanted to change things in the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. He was, shall we say, the liberal wing of the royal family. And one of the things he felt was that the Germans and the Magyars needed to make room for the Slavs, the Serbians, and others, and maybe give them a little more self-determination and so forth. And, of course, the Austrians and the Magyars, which is the Hungarians, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the dual monarchy as it was called, was not ready to become the triple monarchy. Okay? So they're going to be a little upset with him. And consequently, they're not that keen on protecting him because now there's another nephew who is in his 20s. So if anything happens to the Archduke, we have a spare who's more in line with the philosophy of the rest of the royal family. And besides, he didn't marry Sophie, okay? Now, the Archduke himself, while being a very devout Catholic, also was superstitious. And when he goes to Sarajevo, he brings with him a series of charms that some gypsy gave him. Okay? And one is supposed to protect you against bombs, one against knives, one's against poison, you know. He's got the whole collection. You know, the St. Christopher superset. Okay? So he's got that on. And they also give him a special jacket to wear that has many layers of silk in it. Now, silk by weight is stronger than steel. This is sort of the forerunner of Kevlar, okay? He's got this thick jacket with layers and layers of silk, which are designed to make him bulletproof, okay? So he's going to go to Sarajevo with all his good luck charms, his bulletproof vest, and he's going to be with his wife. They can do things together, you know, be together, be treated with respect. And the officials aren't really that keen on protecting him. Instead of calling out the army to guard the route, they position police every couple of feet. But this is going to be one of the things that, you know, the backstory. The Austrians aren't that necessarily worried about anything happening to him now that he's got another relative who could possibly make a better king if anything happens to Franz Joseph. All right? So that's the Austrian side backstory, okay? Now I got to play actor here. Meanwhile, in Belgrade, the Serbians. All right, the Serbians had a long history of feeling that they should be the leaders of what they call the Southern Slavic people, or Yugoslavs, okay? And they're very friendly with the Russians, Pan-Slavic Union, you know, Russia, Slavic peoples together, all right? The Serbian government had signed a treaty after the Second Balkan War that they would respect the boundary lines. They didn't really like that because Bosnia, where most of the people were Serbs, was now part of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and Sarajevo was the capital. Within the Serbian government, there was a secret society called Unity in Debt, or the Black Hand. And the guy who was in charge of it, his code name and his nickname was APIS, A-P-I-S, which in their language means B, okay, B-E-E. He was an organizer of state-sponsored terrorism. The guy liked to assassinate people. As a matter of fact, he even assassinated his own king to put somebody else in power, okay? Now, what did the Serbians do? They put him in charge of military intelligence. Within military intelligence, he creates the Black Hand, a secret society of people dedicated to creating this greater Serbia, all right, with Bosnia and everything else. Now, they used violence. He had already sent assassins out. One of them was a guy named Mohammed Bunbesic. Now, most of the Serbians were Serbian Orthodox, but they wanted to give the image that they were for all the Slavic peoples. So Mohammed, first name gives it away, helps show that, you know, he's like the affirmative action token assassin. Okay. Now, he is brought in on this, and he is sent to kill Governor Katorek. Governor Katorek was like the villain. He was the sheriff of Nottingham for Sarajevo. Okay. Mohammed is supposed to carry a poison dagger and do this guy in. Mohammed gets on the train. He's going to work his way toward the governor instead. But the police are looking for a criminal suspect. When he sees the cops, he ditches the knife, ditches the poison, and comes back and says, I couldn't do it. But if you have another mission for me, I'd be glad to do it. In the meantime, in Serbia, there were these young guys. Princip was one of them. Yeah, you'll forget the names anyway until I get to them, but there was a couple of boys. They were all teenagers, and they all had tuberculosis, which was incurable at that time. These guys have nothing to lose. They are dedicated patriots who know they're not going to last long. they keep bothering the Black Hand with, give us a mission, give us something. And when the Black Hand finds out that the Archduke is coming to Sarajevo on June 28th, that to them is, that's the one. So they start training the boys. They start training them in throwing hand grenades and shooting pistols. Now, the handguns that they're trained on is going to be the link, because this is going to be the first case of a spy agency not having the good sense to use sterile weapons, okay? They're going to use weapons that are going to be easily traced right back to Serbia, and the connection is going to be made. At that time, the popular guns that were around, and Rich had some on his table there, one is the Browning 1900 in .32. That is a popular gun in Europe, and what happens is, the same way we go Scotch tape, Xerox something, people started calling all little automatics Brownings, okay? Now, the Browning 1900 was made in .32 caliber, had the spring on top of the barrel, right? Top of the barrel. A couple of years later, Browning is working with Colt, and he designs the Colt 1903 type with the spring under the barrel. And they make it in .32, which got to be known as .32 Browning. And then Browning tells the Colt company, you know, if you want something with a little more punch, let's design a cartridge that is the same case length as a .32, but only a 9mm. And he creates the 380 ACP, 9mm Browning short, 9mm Cordo, whatever term you want to use. But to modify the Colt 1903, you had to widen the receiver as well as change the barrel, and you had to change the magazine. So Colt made the 1903 in .32 to 1908. Well, Browning learns from this. He goes, there's got to be an easier way. And he starts designing what now is called the Browning 1910. And he designs it so the receiver is the same for a .32 or a 380. The magazine is interchangeable. Even though the witness holes don't line up, you can stick 380 rounds in a Browning 1910 magazine and it'll fit and feed. All you got to do is change the barrel. That's it. Everything else will function. And he designs it with the spring around the barrel this time. Okay, so you had above the barrel, below the barrel, now you got it around the barrel. Well, the Browning company was making a lot of money selling 1900s. So they saw no real reason to discontinue, and they also had no reason to give model numbers. And that's going to be part of the confusion when they start trying to track down the gun that's used. The 1900 is simply called the Browning. The 1910 model is called the improved Browning. Okay? But not everybody uses that. It's a Browning. It's not until the 1920s, when Browning comes out with the 1910/22, that they start calling them the 1900 model, the 1910 model, the 1910-22 model. They're just Browning pistols. And when you interpret from one language to another, when I read the transcript of the trials, okay, when they translated from German to English, you'll see in there Browning revolver. Now, where did this come from, right? Because whatever the German word was for handgun, whoever translated into English, revolver, handgun, revolver, that's like semi-automatic machine gun in the Star Ledger. You know, these people don't know their guns, they don't know their terminology. So when people started doing research, they're getting all this conflicting information. You know, you're shot with a 9mm Browning revolver. Browning never made a revolver, but you know, it's right here in print. All right. Now the Serbians had purchased right from Belgium, right from Fabrique Nationale, a whole bunch of good pistols. When Princip and the other guys are being trained, they go to the Serbian arsenal and they draw 4 pistols for them. And they take them out in Belgrade to a forest and start teaching them how to shoot. Okay? And Princip is the best shot of the group. Okay? They then plan to smuggle the pistols into Sarajevo. Now, APIS and the military intelligence are good with this. Go and kill the Archduke. The word somehow gets to the Prime Minister, and he's like, we really don't need a war. We had enough problems with Austria. But sent there to kill your friend. I'll have trouble with my own people. So he obliquely sends a message through diplomatic channels like, maybe you ought to be careful. There's people out there that might want to hurt the Archduke. But he's not ready to say, here's the names. He then sends word to the border patrol, don't let these guys out of the country. Not knowing that Apis has his own smuggling ring, and he gives like a letter that tells the border guards, these guys are on a secret mission for our government. Should they or anybody be captured or killed, Belgrade will disavow any knowledge of their mission. Let them through. Okay? So they now are sneaking into Bosnia, into Sarajevo. The guns and bombs are being sent through another path, because there's already a Serbian underground there. As a matter of fact, when war breaks out, large numbers of Serbians leave Bosnia and cross over into Serbia to join the Serbian army. Okay? So there was a lot of sympathizers. Okay? The assassins get into Sarajevo and start doing their plan. And the way they're going to do it is, good old Mohammed is going to be number one. He is going to throw a bomb when the car gets in front of him. If his bomb misses or doesn't work right, Gavrilo will throw a bomb. Okay? If that doesn't work, the next guy, Gavrilo, and his friend across the street will open up with pistols. Okay? As the car goes down the road, it's going to go past Princip, Gravis is the guy with a criminal record. He's the one they had to worry about, because the police already know about him. He had trouble in schools, he's a beat-up teacher, real nice guy. Anyway, and then there's Illich. Now, Illich is like the local leader. He's called the fixer. And he keeps telling everybody, you gotta keep security. If any of you get captured, keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth shut. Don't let anybody know. As far as anybody knows, you're a lone assassin. You did it on your own. There was nobody else. Keep cool. Okay? All right. The car with the Archduke, see it comes along here. Now, their plan is, after you've killed the Archduke, you are to take your packet of poison that was given to you by the government, Serbian government, take the poison and jump into the river Milaka. Now, when they did their leader's recon, the river was 6 to 8 feet deep because it was springtime. Okay? So, you take the poison, that's going to kill you, but just in case, jump into the river, and that'll drown you. Problem solved. Nobody knows. Witness is gone. It's a good plan. Somebody had really looked at it. All right. The car comes. Muhammad sees it, and he doesn't throw his bomb. Okay? He does not throw his bomb. He later testifies, I was about to. And I saw a cop, and I thought he'd stop me, so I choked. The car gets next to Gavrilo. He takes out the bomb. He hits the percussion cap against the lamppost. Throws the bomb. As it's flying through the air, the driver sees it coming, hits the accelerator. The Archduke sees the bomb coming, throws his hand up, the bomb bounces off his arm, rolls under the car behind him, and detonates, hurting the people in the car and hurting the passerbys. Okay? What Gavrilo didn't realize, it had a 10-second delay. He hit it and threw it. Okay. He then follows the plan. He opens up his poison. Take the poison. Alright?
It was sugar.
Jumps into the river. He's finished, right? Wrong answer. First of all, the poison. Now, today at the Abraham Clark cafeteria where I work, I picked up a packet of baby cut carrots. Now, it says here, Best Buy, March 20th, 2014. That tells you something. Anyway, the Serbian government, in its infinite wisdom, does not label its poison use-by date. The stuff's expired. So all the stuff he's putting into his mouth isn't killing him. He jumps into the river. He's going to drown. Problem is, it's now June 28th. The spring thaw is over. The river is 10 centimeters deep. Now, for those of you who forgot your metric conversion, 4 inches. Okay? So he's got a problem. The cops come, they grab their swords, and they start beating the crap out of him. Okay? And they pull him out of the river, and they pull him out of the river, and they bring him up. The Archduke's car has driven by, and these other guys don't know what the hell's happening. The Archduke is gone. Okay? And they pull Krvenović out of the river. Somebody snaps a picture of him. Okay? And that picture is one of the most misidentified photos in history. When it first came out, it was labeled Krvenović, the bomb thrower, attempted assassin. But somewhere along the line, some newspaper put, this is a picture of the guy who tried to kill the Archduke, meaning Princip. So it gets printed in a lot of history books as, just as Princip tried to shoot you, they took this picture of him. Well, that caused another problem, because when we get to Princip, there was a guy who tried to capture Princip, and when he sees the picture, he goes, no, that's me. The police thought I was the shooter. And he's somewhere else. It's Krvenović. A lot of history books will show you picture of Princip, point of capture. There is none. Okay? Now, the Archduke drives down the road, and the assassins all take off except for Princip. Princip moves from his position here to over here, because the plan was, after the Archduke gave his speech, he'd be coming down the road, make a right-hand turn, and go on Franz Joseph Street. So, Princip is outside of Schiller's Deli. Okay? In the meantime, the Archduke has shown up, and he's kind of angry. I mean, a bomb went off, people got injured, and the governor is giving this wonderful speech. The people love you, welcome to our city, here's the key to the city. And the Archduke's like, screw you, I almost got killed out there, And, this is horrible, and I want to see what happened to the people. I want to go to the hospital. To go to the hospital, he's got to go back down the Apple Key. It's the name of the street, the Apple Key. He is not going to do the Franz Joseph routine. Princip is at Schiller's Deli. Now, there's a film that they show, and they go, Princip went into Schiller's Deli and was having a sandwich. And when he finished his sandwich, he came out, and there's the Archduke. The chance of Princip having a sandwich in Belgrade in 1914 is about the same as Paul Revere having a slice of pizza before he got on his horse, okay? It's not the food they eat, okay? Plus, it's Sunday morning. Schiller's Deli is closed, okay? He's just standing out there, all right? Now, the car comes back. They make the right-hand turn because they forgot to tell the drivers of the change. They're going to go straight through. So all of a sudden, the car goes and turns here, and Governor Katorin goes, no, stop, wrong way, we got to back up. One of two things has happened, and you get conflicting stories. One is the car in front stops, and the car with the Archduke stops, because you got a car in front that stopped. The other is, it has no rear gear. You have to put it in neutral, hop out, and push it back. Whatever the gear story is, the car stops right in front of Princip. Okay? He's 10 feet away. He reaches into his pocket, pulls out the pistol, rapidly fires 2 shots, brings the pistol to his head, and he's wrestled by the crowd. And then the cops come. He then reaches into his packet, rips it open, takes his poison, and like the Abraham Clark carrots, passed to use my day. So he gets a little sick, but he's brought to the police station. There, he is questioned mercilessly. He doesn't talk. Krvenović won't talk. But the Austrian police force has names of suspects and starts tracking them down. And they pick up Illich, the guy who says, keep your mouth shut, don't say anything. He starts singing, gives everybody's names away, tells them where the guns were hidden, how they got them, how the Serbians assisted them. He is singing like a canary, okay? In the meantime, Mohammed has skipped off to the country of Montenegro, where he starts bragging about what him and his buddies just did, okay? So he gets locked up because there's an extradition treaty. But the guards are friendly to him and they let him escape. So he's gone. He never goes to trial, okay? Now, the two bullets. The Archduke gets hit right above the vest in the jugular. Sophie catches a round right in the stomach, and she's pregnant. And as she drops on his lap, his last words are, "Sophie, live for our children." Okay? They get him to the hospital. They're both dead. Both are dead. Insult to injury. When they bring them back to Austria and they lay out their bodies, she is put on a platform 18 inches lower than his, next to him, because he's not his equal. Okay? So they have the jacket he's wearing. They recover the bullet. They've now captured the suspects, and they start doing their investigation. Well, one of the things they do is they contact the Fabriek Nationale factory in Belgium, and they go, "Oh, serial number 19074. Yeah, okay, yeah. We sold that to the Serbians." The link is there. The witnesses are saying they got it from the Serbians. The Belgian factory is saying it's part of a shipment of guns we sent to Serbia. So the Austrians now go, we have an excuse to really screw with the Serbians. So they list what's called the ultimatum. They say by July 28th, we want the following items, or there's going to be trouble. They then contact their friends, the Kaiser, and say, we got problems with Serbia. Will you back us? And that's where Kaiser Wilhelm issues the famous blank check. Yeah, anything you do, I'll back you. Don't move, okay? The Serbians go and contact the Russians. And they go, we got problems here with the Austrian-Hungarians. Will you back us up? Don't worry. The Russians then contact their friends, the French. Listen, if we mobilize, you got to mobilize too. The Germans are whipping out the Schlieffen Plan and presenting it to the Kaiser. And they're going, well, if there's a war, here's what we got to do. Here's our assumptions. Number one, it's going to take 2 months for the Russians to mobilize. We have to defeat France in 6 weeks, which we can do. The trick is we got to come in through Belgium. Now, if the Belgians let us through, no problem. If the Belgians decide to resist, small problem. It's only the Belgians. What about the English? And the answer that he's given is, battleships don't have wheels. Don't worry about Britain. They got a great navy, but they're contemptible little army. No problem. Germany contacts its friend Italy and goes, you know, you're part of our treaty. And Italy goes, you know, our treaty says that if you're attacked, we have to help you. If you do the attacking, but tell you what we're going to do. If you give us land in Austria, where a lot of Italians live, we can see it our way to help you. The Austrians go, we're not giving up anything. Okay? The German General Staff goes to work again. They come back to the Kaiser and they go, if Italy enters the war, they will probably need 4 or 5 of our divisions to help defeat the French. If the Italians go to war against us, the Austrians will need 4 or 5 of our divisions to defeat them. In effect, they're a wash, whichever side they join. We're going to end up helping one or the other. Alright? Now, all the generals and all these armies are going to their leaders and going, can you postpone this war? Because these countries are agricultural countries. They're going, we don't want to mobilize in August. That's before the harvest comes in. If you mobilize, you're going to be drawing all these farm boys away from the farms when we need them on the farm. Can you delay this war till, say, Oktoberfest? You know, that would work out better for us, okay? But each country is sort of saying, if we wait too long, the other guy will cream us. And that's the big theme in Barbara Tuchman's The Guns of August. She calls it war by timetable. Everybody had these plans of how quickly to organize your army. Okay? So while they're talking about organizing their armies to go in combat, and I'm going to get into the trial of the assassins, the Austrians are saying, we want the right to investigate who did this. We know it's something in Serbia. We want full power in Serbia to arrest people, try them, everything else. And the Serbians are going, that's a violation of our sovereignty. The answer is no. So Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. The Russians start to mobilize. The Germans called the Russians, stop your mobilization, or we're going to have to mobilize. We're not going to wait for you to come ready and kick our ass, you know, we're mobilizing. Germany mobilizes. France mobilizes. Okay? Britain starts getting its army ready. And Italy is still sitting this out, waiting to see if we can give them the better deal. Okay? They're all mobilizing. The Serbians are in a bad position. They're vastly outnumbered. But, now, years and years ago, they asked, I think it was Alan Dulles, was that the CIA? Was it Alan or was his brother? I forget which one of the Dulles brothers. Who is the arch traitor in history? He goes, Albert Riddell. They asked somebody in the KGB, who's the arch traitor in history? Albert Riddell. You know, who the hell is Albert Riddell? Okay, Albert Riddell was the head of the Austrian Secret Intelligence Service. In 1901, the Russians found out he was what we now call gay. So they blackmailed him, gave him lots of money, gave him lots of young boys. He, in turn, kept giving them all the information on the Austrians. He worked his way up to the point where he was in charge of counterintelligence against the Russians. Okay? Every time somebody from Russia would say, I'm willing to sell out the Tsar, you know, he would pass it on to the Tsar's people and they go arrest and execute you. Okay? Along the way, he sold them Austrian War Plan number 3. Now, Austrian War Plan number 3 was how to fight Serbia. So, the Serbians had Austrian War Plan number 3. They knew exactly what the Austrians were going to do. And in that way, little old Serbia was able to blunt numerous attacks because for whatever reason, the Austrians didn't change their plan despite the fact that in 1913, after Albert retired, the German intelligence service found out that somebody had been supplying information and was still being paid off. So they told the new Austrian counterintelligence chief, here's the information. They set up an ambush. The guy comes to collect his money at the dead drop. They lose him. He hops into a taxi and off he goes. Lost that one. After a while, the same taxi comes back. They run into the taxi. Where did you take your last drive, last customer? Oh, to the hotel, whatever it is, Hotel Budapest, who knows, okay. Anyway, they get into the car, and while they're in the car, they find the sheath to a pocket knife. They go, anybody lost this? So they go to the hotel, they go up to the hotel, and they go, would you make an announcement? We have found a sheath for a pocket knife in a cab. Would the owner like to come back and claim it? They wait. Down comes Albert Riddell, who they recognize as their former boss. Okay? Well, he's arrested. He's brought in. He's then given the honorable option, being a good Roman Catholic, they're sorry he's going to have to die in sin, but here's your pistol in 1 round. So he does himself in. But they don't change their war plans. Okay? So good old Serbia is taking horrendous casualties. Of all the nations in World War I, Serbia suffered the most. 2/3 of their men, between 16 and 50, became casualties. Either wounded, captured, or killed. They took a beating. Okay? Now, in the meantime, they're going to hold a trial for the assassins. Mohammed, he's gone. All right, they hold the trial, and Princip says, I'm really sorry about what happened to Sophie. We're really sorry we didn't know Franz Joseph was a father who had 3 kids, another one on the way. But we considered him an enemy of Serbia, and I regret that we shot him. Now they're going to decide the penalty. Under Austrian law, people under the age of 20 cannot be given the death penalty. They try to find out Princip's birthday, and they run into a real problem. In Europe, until about 1920, some countries and people use the Julian calendar, and some use the Gregorian calendar. And they're only off by maybe 2 weeks. So they finally get the records, and the question is it Gregorian or is it Julian? Then they find out it makes no difference. He's at least 2 weeks away from being 20 when he committed his crime. So he's under the age of 20. Cannot be executed. Alright? So they take the assassins. Okay? And unfortunately, I said this is not going to come out too well. The real loser in all of this is the guy who squealed. Now, the general rule of police work is, first one who talks, walks. Well, not in Austria. Danielo Illich, executed February February 3rd, 1915. Gavrilo Princip, February 3rd, 1915. He was part of the underground in Sarajevo that was given safe houses and stuff like that. All right? About a year later, Gavrilo Princip, the guy who threw the bomb, dies of tuberculosis while in jail. He gets sentenced to 20 years because he's under 20, can't be given a death sentence. A month later, Trifiko Grbez, the guy with the criminal record, he dies of TB. Okay? Then I got Apis here, the guy who ran the intelligence service. The guy is just into assassinations. He decides he doesn't like the way the Serbian government is running the war, so he's going to go kill off some of the leaders. So he gets arrested by his own people. He's put on trial for treason in what's called the Solanka Trials. And at the Solanka Trials, he admits everything on the assassination. That it was his idea, the Black Hand was involved, they supplied everything, and he admits to everything, and he's found guilty of treason, and he's executed by the Serbs in June of 1917. Now, some people will argue that, you know what, he was just a fall guy. They all knew about it, he was just a fall guy, because at that point, in 1917, Serbia is having secret negotiations with Austria about ending the war. Because Serbia is just taking a beating. They caused a lot of deaths. The argument on Alfred Weidel is that he probably caused the death of 500,000 Austrians with all the information he had sold to the Russians and indirectly to the Serbians. April 1918, Gavrilo dies of tuberculosis. Now, Mohammed, he gets tried with Apis, because he's still an assassin. He's still doing the dirty work. He gets sent to jail, and then he's pardoned after the war. In 1943, the Ustasi, which were pro-Nazi forces in that part of the world, they find him and they kill him. Okay? So he dies in 1943. Some of the other guys that were convicted, one was given 13 years, one was given 16 years. Both are pardoned in 1918 when the war is over. Chevenko Pavlovic, he lives to June 1980, he dies at age 84. And Vasko Krilovic, whose brother was one of the guys that was hung, he lives to June 11th, 1990, he dies at age 93. Okay? So some of these guys lasted a long time after the war. Yeah.
Got older involved in the whole thing?
They were, okay, these were young guys who, when Daniel Illich, with the big mouth, we're going to take care of the Archduke. Oh, can we play? Can we play? Can we join? So he recruited locals to help him out. And they were minor characters.
They weren't there.
They were there. They were, with the gun across the street, the bomb, but they didn't do anything. But when they're convicted, they're looked upon as minor characters. And that's why they get 13 years, 16 years. I think they were 17 years old. They were just looked upon as, juvies who got conned by the older brother, or, in peer pressure. Now, the automobile, the death car. In the 1950s, after James Dean was killed in a car, all kind of rumors started about these death cars. So, do you think that's a bad death car? How about the one the Archduke was in? It was blood red. And after he was killed, the next owner drove off the road and lost an arm. The next owner was in a car crash and was killed. The third owner died mysteriously while in the car. And then during World War II, it was blown up by Allied bombers. And all these stories started about the death car. Number one, it's green. Number two, right after the assassination, the Austrian government took custody of it, and they still have it. It's in the museum. It's still there. It's green. But, for those of you who believe in Illuminati and all those other good stories, all right, this is the license plate of that car. A, Roman numeral 3, and then 118. Now, for all of you conspiracy fans, people went out and said, oh my God, A stands for armistice, and then you got the 11 for November, 11 for the 11th, and 18 for 1918. Wow! Back in 1914, the Illuminati predicted the armistice. That is the license plate. Here's the problem. The German and Austrian word for armistice is not armistice, it's Waffenstillstand. Which means stopping the shooting, okay? And a weapon standstill. And the Austrians, they signed their armistice November 4th, 1918. So, but that is the plate. It's on the car. They have a picture of it that day when it turned the corner. But, you know, there's always somebody who reads into things. So that's, you know, that little bit. Now, a few sidelights to get that book, Europe Goes to War. I found it right now.
What's his name? French guy.
Nostradamus? He predicted so many things that, you know. I mean, if you ever run into a real Nostradamus and he's really good, him and I are going to the racetrack together, that's all. All right. Yeah, Herb.
What was the real reason that they wanted to assassinate that Archduke? And that's number one. And number two is when the bullet went into him, if it was in his jacket, how could it be?
Missed his jacket, got his jugular. It was a pure luck neck shot, hit the jugular.
Oh, he bled out?
Bled out. And they have his jacket at the museum.
The museum is the Austrian Military Museum in Vienna. They've got the car, they have the jacket, and I'll get to how they got the gun. Yeah.
The bullet was in the jacket?
No. In his neck, and when he died, they retrieved the bullet, and I think it's Kovaci, the castle. He had a favorite castle, and it's a museum, and they got the actual bullet in a case there that was recovered.
And what was the actual reason to assassinate him?
They thought they would cause trouble. The Serbian, the Black Hand wanted to cause trouble. You know. Now, the thing is, when World War I breaks out, there were cheers in all the countries. People were looking for a war. Okay, there's that picture of Hitler in Vienna with the crowd, and they're all cheering the war. In Russia, people, you know, suddenly joined the army, and people foolishly went into that war because there hadn't been one for so long. There weren't any really veterans going around going, "You stupid,
well, wasn't
crazy."
Wasn't it that France and Germany, they wanted to get the industry going to make money?
That's the argument. It's called the merchants of death argument. That all the munition workers were ready, you know, to make a fortune.
France and Germany got problems with Franco-Prussian.
Right. The French wanted revenge for the Franco-Prussian War. There was also what we call social Darwinism. A lot of people felt that war was the ultimate test of who's the best person. So, since we're the best people, we'll beat everybody else, and that'll prove we are the best people. Okay? War is the final test. Also, a lot of the nations, their governments, their military staffs were telling them, this is a good time to fight a war. If we wait any longer, our enemies are going to get stronger. Now, I mentioned the Schlieffen Plan, okay? Certain assumptions. One, it's going to take 2 months for the Russians to mobilize. Belgium will not interfere. We can defeat France in 6 weeks. Britain is not really a major player. And if you get the book, 1914, little sidelights. When the governments mobilized their armies, they had war stocks of canned food. Okay, before then, you always marched with fresh food, and you brought animals with you. When the British issued their soldiers canned food, they went to the barracks, opened the cans, started eating them, and said, "It's great. It's supposed to be war emergency food." Well, we did. Well, nobody told us. Hey, it's good stuff. We ate it all. Okay? The Austrians were given canned food. I ain't carrying this heavy crap. So they threw it down on the roads. And then later on, when the food wasn't catching up, they were like, "Where's our food? Those cans you had." But talk about national character. The best story is the Germans. They were capturing starving German soldiers. And when they searched them, they found cans of food in their bread bags. And they're going, "Why didn't you eat them?" "Oh, we're not allowed to open those cans until our officer tells us to." Okay. All right. All right. Now, yeah.
Japan got into this too.
Yeah, Japan gets in because Japan is friends with Britain and sees Japan wanted to join the white man club. Japan saw itself as the whitest of the Asians and wanted to be treated with respect as a world power. They had participated in the Boxer Rebellion as an equal with Italy and France, and they thought, this proves we belong to the big boy club. Okay? So we had defeated Russia. So they go, we'll take care of all the German possessions that are in Asia, which weren't many. There was a city in China, there were some islands, okay? and they're friends with Britain. So when they come to the Treaty of Versailles, they want their fair share of the booty. And they get sort of shunted aside, along with the Kurds, the Arabs, the Jews. I mean, the world powers, you didn't join their club without invitation. So that causes anger among the Japanese inside, and the Italians figure they got screwed by the Allies. So they don't mind making friends with Germany for World War Part II.
Now why did Italy stay on the Allied?
Italy stayed on the Allied side and took a beating. And actually American soldiers were sent to fight in Italy in November of 1918 against the Austrians. The only time American soldiers fought Austrians was like late October, early November in support of the Italians.
I didn't know that.
The rest of our troops were in France.
Why did the Italians go on the Allied?
What was the deal that was made with the Italians?
No, the Italians were supposed to receive a lot of land in Trieste, what was now Yugoslavia, and the Allies sort of are. The Italian Prime Minister, I think it was Orlando.
Yeah.
Okay. He leaves the Treaty of Versailles because he feels he's not being respected. Clemenceau of France and Wilson and the Prime Minister of Britain, they're really doing all the wheeling and dealing. And Russia, because they had dropped out of the war, is told, you get nothing.
Wow.
You dropped out of the war, we don't even talk to you guys.
But basically, Italy got nothing. They got the part of Austria where...
Yeah, up in the northern part, the Trieste area, whatever it was, which they basically...
All the colonies were all shared only by France, UK, and so on. That set the resentment that the Italians were also going.
And of course, Mussolini comes out of the war bitter about not getting his fair share.
At the beginning, he was not in favor of allying with Hitler. The first attempt to take over Austria was verified by Italy. At the time, was before Italy started getting its own colony, which set the sanctions and so on, that pushed Italy on the side of Hitler.
Now, Italy gets, as part of war reparations, they get a whole collection of old guns from Austria and everybody else, which they then use in the colonies.
Well, and also were sold to Finland. A lot of the Finnish museums have receivers. They were actually sold from Italy to Finland in the 20s or 30s. They were acquired as part of the war book of the Austrians that was given to Italy as part of the war reparations.
You got to remember, Italy and Germany are the last two unified nations in Europe, and their peoples were spread out in other jurisdictions, and then later on, same with my ancestors, the Polish, were divided up between Prussia, Russia, and Austria.
But they lived in that town,
Terrestre. Now, the pistol, okay? What happened to the pistol?
That's a good point.
For many years, the story was it got stolen. And they knew the serial number, 19074. And I had to go to gun shows looking for 19074 on the chance that some GI had swiped it and brought it back to the United States. But here's what happened. After the trial, the priest who gave the last rites was given the pistol and some other mementos because he was going to build a museum for Franz Joseph. And he was a Jesuit. In 1926, before he got a chance to open up his museum, he died. And his order inherited all these items. So they locked them up in the monastery. And for years the story was, well, those guns were probably in the Vienna evidence room. Maybe the Nazis took it, or maybe, souvenir-hungry GIs got into it, and, they got the pistols. But nobody knew where they were. In 2004, the Jesuits were taking inventory at the monastery, and they find the pistol. They contact the Austrian government, and they go, we have some items here of historical value. So all of a sudden, it's the pistol that started World War I, blah, 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 has been discovered. And they took it out, and they put it in the Austrian Museum in 2004. In 2009, the Imperial War Museum in Britain asked, can we borrow it for a year? And they said, sure. And it went to England and was on display for a year. And then it was returned to the Austrian Museum. And there's an article there from one of the history magazines that comes out, and they show you the pistol. And if you go on the internet, you see pictures of the pistol. It's pretty well covered. But the argument for years was the caliber. There was so much confusion because, again, people that don't know their guns were reporting it. I remember seeing the evidence pictures of the Princip's trial. They show the 4 pistols. They're clearly 1910 models. And they had the rounds out of the magazine next to them. And you look at them, and they're the chunky .380. But people kept insisting it was a 32, it was a 32. If you get American Rifleman TV, they keep saying, oh yeah, he was shot with a 32. You know, people started writing to like Arms and Armor and other magazines, and they finally contacted the museum director in Austria. Like, can you check for us and just tell us what it is? It's a .380. It's a 9 millimeter short, which is, bigger than a 32, a little more punch. But, Princip fired 2 shots, both were lethal. And bullet placement is more important than power and everything else. By pure luck, he got 2 killer shots with that pistol. And like I said, it's in the museum. Now, June 28th is coming up, the 100th anniversary. So God knows what you're going to see on TV about what happened, and we'll see how many people still refer to it as a 32 automatic. And some people that are like considered weapons experts, Ian Hobb, his books used to be, you get at Barnes & Noble on the discount tables. He has, it's a 1900 32. It's a 1910 and .380. And I think now there's enough people that found out that that's what it is. Not that it, historically makes a difference. The countries got involved in the war. Everybody jumped in because they were under treaty obligation. Now, the Schlieffen Plan. They go through Belgium. The Belgians go, no, you're not going through our country. We're neutral. We're going through. Just let us go through. We're not going to let you go through. So they start to fight them. Britain, under treaty, is obligated to defend Belgian neutrality. Britain sends its army in, and the British are convinced that their professional soldiers will kick German professional soldiers. And the very first battle, the British win. And they're bragging about, our pros kick their pros. And intelligence goes, they're Bavarian farmers. They're the 23rd Mess Kit Repair Battalion or something, okay? And they're going, how can they be from Bavaria? That's at the other end. The German mobilization plan was very efficient. It could move soldiers all over the country rapidly. And at the train stations, there already were barracks built and mess halls where a train could arrive at, say, 8 in the morning. You got off the train, you got breakfast, you got back on the train at 9, at 9:15, the next train pulled in with soldiers. Okay, or you went to this barracks, you spent the night, you got up in the morning, you left, the train came in with the next bunch of guys asleep in the barracks. They had a very efficient system of mobilizing their troops and getting them to where they were needed. And that was something the French had not planned on. So a larger German army ends up on their border, and they thought could happen. But the Germans got fooled. They thought it would take the Russians 2 months to mobilize. The Russians in 5 weeks are mobilized. Not well prepared, but they're mobilized. And now they're heading toward Germany. And the plan was defeat France in 6 weeks, turn around 2 weeks later, take on the Russians. Now you got to take on the Russians. They're on their way. You haven't defeated the French. The Belgians are slowing you down, and now the English have arrived. Okay? All these countries had planned on a short war. It'd be over by Christmas. 6 months. You go home, victorious, throw your parade, and that's it. And now they're in for the bloodbath. And they're going to be tied up. And when the war does end in 1918, the way it ends just creates a lot of problems. The United States did not surrender to North Korea in 1953. We signed an armistice. And so did the Koreans. The Germans did not surrender November 11th, 1918. They signed an armistice, which simply means we're going to stop killing each other, let's talk. And that's why Hitler gets into power, because he's able to say, we didn't give up. The German army didn't march into POW camps. Our army was on foreign territory when the fighting stopped. We marched back carrying our weapons. That's not a surrender. All right. Any other questions? Anything that I put out in that book I didn't cover here? Okay?
Yeah. What was the division that fought with the Italians? The American division?
Yeah, I really don't know, but there was American soldiers, and they weren't necessarily Italian-American soldiers, although there was a good number there, which helped, you know, in dealing with the population. But they basically were sent there to bolster the Italians, and by the time they arrived, I think it was October of 1918, and the war was over, like, November 4th. So there's that one battle where American soldiers with Italian soldiers fought Austrians. Yeah.
The reparations put against Germany was so severe that now Wilson was against that severity of that, wasn't he?
See, the trouble you have with Wilson, you know, in history, Wilson, let's say you're on a football team and you've been playing 3 quarters and you've been injured, your guys are injured, and all of a sudden a guy comes in from the back bench, gets on the field and helps score a touchdown and goes, I won, I won, I won. That's the Americans. We arrive late and start taking credit for everything. Okay? And everybody else is going, we paid in blood for 4 years. You guys come in for the glory. Yeah, you come in for the last 6 months and you want all the glory and you want to determine all these things. We want to screw these people. The Prime Minister of Britain once said, we will squeeze the German orange until the seeds squeak. We're going to take it out of them. They're going to pay for this war. They're going to pay for veterans benefits. They're going to pay for rebuilding. They're going to pay for all the widows and orphans. We're going to make them pay. And the Americans are like, well, what's the problem? Well, you guys didn't suffer. As a matter of fact, you guys made money. Before World War I, we were a debtor nation. We're one now, gang. But at the end of World War I, we became a creditor nation. People owed us. Okay? Because the war was great for America, economy and everything else. Because we were the only manufacturing country. And then when the war ends, they got to rebuild. Our factories are in great shape. We can start selling goods around the world. The Japanese and the Americans picked up all of Britain, not all of it, a lot of Britain and Germany and France's customers. If you own a restaurant and you got closed down for repairs, you own Burger King and you close down, people go to McDonald's. When you reopen, not all your customers are going to come back. So when World War I ended and Britain is ready to produce manufactured goods, the vendors have been buying from the U.S. for the past couple of years. They don't really care that you're back in business. So Wilson wanted to be the nice guy. The 12 points, self-determination for people, all this stuff. The Allies were glad to let him talk because they had already made their secret deals. And when they come to the meeting, Wilson goes, let's be nice. Okay? Britain and France go, screw the Germans. 2 against 1, we win next. You know, come on. Anybody else? Questions? It's a hot day. Yeah. Secret police. Yeah. I said Stasi?
Stasi was the East German police.
East German, I'm sorry. Stasi.
East secret police.
The secret police in Austria?
We were talking about the pro-Nazi...
Oh, Ustashi. U-T-A-S-H-I, the Ustashi. They were a pro-Nazi militia. I forget whether they were Croats, Slovenes, or whatever. They were ethnically based. And after the war, the Ustashi, they're considered the equivalent of SS, war criminals and all this other stuff. Yes, Ustashi, U-T-A-S-H-I. All right. All right, thank you. Don't give me a call. And if you want to look here, I got the picture of Gavrilo being captured and bios of the different guys.